Every successful man carries within himself a secret terror that slowly destroys his relationships from the inside out. And today, we're going to expose this hidden psychological warfare that Sigmund Freud discovered over a century ago. Picture this scenario. A confident businessman who commands respect in boardrooms suddenly breaks into a cold sweat when his partner says those four dreaded words, "We need to talk." His pulse quickens, his palms moisten, his entire body goes into fight or flight mode. Why does this happen? Because at that precise moment, an ancient unconscious fear awakens, a fear so deeply buried in his psyche that he would never consciously acknowledge its existence. This terror isn't logical or rational, it's primitive, instinctual, and more powerful than any conscious thought process. It determines whether men can truly love or whether they will sabotage themselves repeatedly. It explains why countless relationships crumble before they even have a chance to flourish. We're about to uncover 6 invisible fears that haunt every man's romantic life, fears that Freud identified decades before modern psychology even existed. If you want to understand what really happens inside the male mind when it comes to love, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because the truth you're about to discover will permanently change how you see men in relationships. The first invisible fear manifests as his compulsive need to control every situation, even when that control destroys the very love he's trying to protect. Imagine this scene. A man meticulously plans the perfect weekend getaway, every minute scheduled, every restaurant booked, every route mapped out with precision. His partner spontaneously suggests they forget the itinerary and just wander through the city to see what they discover together. Instantly, he becomes tense and irritated, saying, "That won't work. We've already planned everything." What appears to be mere perfectionism is actually raw fear in disguise. Freud would recognize this behavior as a manifestation of the anal stage, an early developmental phase where control and order dominate everything, but beneath this lies something far more profound: the existential terror of chaos, unpredictability, and life itself. This fear roots itself in the masculine psyche like poison. The man unconsciously believes that losing control equals complete annihilation. His ego ideal, the image of the strong, unshakable man, cannot tolerate uncertainty, so he develops defense mechanisms like obsessive planning, micromanagement, and the compulsive need to have the final word in every discussion. But here's where the tragedy unfolds. The more he tries to control, the more love slips through his fingers like sand. His partner feels constrained, patronized, invisible. She wants spontaneity, lightness, shared adventures. But he cannot let go because letting go means losing power over his existence. Freud understood that this control obsession is actually a projection of inner insecurity. The man who externally wants to dominate everything feels internally powerless. He fears others might discover how truly vulnerable he is, so he creates a facade of invincibility and becomes a prisoner of his own anxiety. The irony is perfect. In attempting to save his relationship, he systematically destroys it. His partner becomes a threat to his control rather than a source of love and security. Every spontaneous desire she expresses becomes an attack on his fragile self-image. This fear of losing control shows up in the smallest details. He must choose the restaurant, he must drive the route, he must decide when to leave. Even during intimate moments, he wants to maintain leadership, not from dominance, but from fear. The tragic element is that genuine love requires exactly the opposite: surrender, trust, willingness to fall freely. But that's precisely what this man fears most deeply. He cannot love because love means giving up control, and his unconscious perceives that as a deadly threat. Do you recognize this pattern? Have you ever watched a man become anxious when plans suddenly change? That's not a personality trait, that's pure fear in action. But if you think that's overwhelming, wait until you hear about the second fear. It's even more subtle and destructive, appearing exactly when love could become most beautiful. The second signal reveals itself through his withdrawal, precisely when the relationship could deepen into something extraordinary. Picture this scenario. After wonderful weeks together, his partner opens herself completely to him, sharing her deepest thoughts, her vulnerability, her dreams. She gives him her entire heart unreservedly. But instead of celebrating, he pulls away, becoming distant, suddenly finding excuses for having less time available. He creates space between them, not because he doesn't love her, but because he loves her too intensely. Freud would interpret this behavior as an echo of the Oedipus complex. During early childhood development, the boy learns that excessive closeness to his mother is dangerous, threatening his masculine identity and triggering castration anxieties. This ancient fear unconsciously carries into every romantic relationship. Emotional intimacy activates primitive panic within him. His unconscious warns, "Too close is dangerous, you might lose yourself, you might become weak." So he develops the most subtle defense mechanisms. He becomes sarcastic when she's vulnerable. He deflects when conversations go too deep. He rationalizes feelings away instead of experiencing them. This fear of intimacy is paradoxical because it doesn't arise from lack of love, but from excessive love. The man senses that this woman has the power to completely transform him. She could make him tear down his walls, drop his masks, show his authentic self, and that terrifies him completely. Freud recognized that men experience double threat in love. They fear both merger and separation. Getting too close means risking their identity. Staying too distant means losing love. So they remain in an agonizing middle position, close enough to possess but distant enough to feel secure. This terror appears in his language. He discusses problems but not emotions. He shares opinions but not fears. He tells stories but not his truth. Every time she tries to come closer, he skillfully evades, not consciously, but automatically, like a reflex. The tragedy is that he destroys exactly what he needs most. His soul hungers for connection, for someone who truly knows him and loves him anyway. But his fear sabotages every attempt to build that connection. She notices naturally women have refined intuition for when men close themselves off. She feels rejected, unloved, not important enough. She doesn't understand that his withdrawal is actually a sign of his love, a desperate attempt to protect himself from the intensity of his own emotions. This fear of emotional intimacy transforms the most beautiful moments into threats. Every "I love you" becomes a challenge to his autonomy. Every vulnerable moment becomes an invitation he's afraid to accept. Have you ever experienced a man withdrawing just when things were getting serious? That's not indifference, that's fear in its purest form. But wait until you discover the third fear. It's even more paradoxical because it shows up precisely when he loves most deeply. The third signal is the most insidious of all. He sabotages the relationship himself to prevent the pain of being abandoned first. Imagine this situation. A man is deeply in love, happier than ever before. The relationship is going wonderfully, but suddenly he begins provoking arguments, criticizing small things, becoming unreliable, deliberately creating conflicts. His partner is confused. Why is he destroying something so beautiful? The answer lies in one of the deepest masculine fears, the terror of abandonment. Freud would identify this as a manifestation of early childhood object loss anxieties. Every human experiences moments in early childhood when they felt abandoned, whether through the mother leaving the room or emotional absence from parents. This primal experience of abandonment shapes the unconscious for life. In men, this fear gets amplified by social conditioning. They learn early, men don't cry, men are strong, men don't need anyone. But secretly they crave connection like every other human being. This discrepancy between longing and learned independence creates internal conflict of enormous intensity. The terror of abandonment paradoxically gets triggered by love itself. The more he loves, the greater his pain would be if he lost her. So his unconscious develops perverse logic. If I hurt her first, If I destroy the relationship myself, then she can't abandon me. Then I have control over my pain. This self-sabotage is a defense mechanism of the cruelest kind. He begins creating tests. Does she love me even when I'm moody? Will she stay if I behave impossibly? Will she endure if I push her away? Every test is a desperate attempt to prove the constancy of her love and simultaneously a self-fulfilling prophecy of her departure. Freud recognized that this abandonment fear often connects with narcissistic wounds from childhood. The man who experienced emotional neglect as a child cannot believe as an adult that he's truly lovable. His unconscious whispers, "She'll leave you anyway. Everyone leaves. You're not good enough." The tragedy is the illogic of his fear. He fears abandonment pain so intensely that he causes it himself. He believes it hurts less if he controls the ending rather than helplessly watching her go. But in reality, he doubles his pain because he loses her and must live with the guilt of causing it. This fear shows up in his behavior subtly. He stops making effort. He forgets important things. He becomes emotionally unavailable. He provokes fights over trivial matters, all to make her leave so he can prove he was right. His partner senses this sabotage but doesn't understand it. She only sees the man she loves, turning away from her, and fights desperately for the relationship. But the more she fights, the more she confirms his unconscious conviction that she'll eventually abandon him anyway. Do you recognize this pattern? Have you ever witnessed a man begin destroying a wonderful relationship for no apparent reason? The fourth fear will surprise you even more, because it targets what he most reveres. The fourth signal appears in his desperate need to deny her emotional superiority, even though he secretly knows she's stronger than him. Picture this scene. During an intense argument, he loses composure, becomes loud and uncontrolled. She remains calm, collects herself, speaks with clear voice about her feelings and his. In that moment, he experiences something humiliating. He recognizes that she's emotionally more mature than him. She can articulate what he can only feel. She understands connections that remain hidden from him. She's simply superior in handling emotions, and that terrifies him. Freud would call this fear reverse penis envy. While he originally assumed women envied men their physical power, he later recognized a much subtler truth. Men envy women their emotional intelligence, their intuition, their capacity for genuine connection. This panic about feminine power roots deeply in the collective male unconscious. For millennia, men defined themselves through physical strength and rational thinking, but in modern relationships, other qualities matter: emotional maturity, empathy, communication ability. And here, women are often superior, not through biology, but through socialization and social permission to live and express feelings. The man senses this superiority and reacts with panic. His ego cannot tolerate that she's better than him in such an important area. So he develops defense mechanisms. He rationalizes away her emotions. You're too sensitive. He devalues her intuition. That's illogical. He reduces her strengths to weaknesses. You overthink everything. This fear of feminine power shows up most clearly in conflicts. When she presents her arguments clearly and emotionally intelligently, he feels inferior. His unconscious screams, "She's superior to you. She sees through you. She has control." So he resorts to primitive means, volume, dominance, attempts to intimidate her. Freud recognized that this fear also connects with the mother imago. Every man carries the image of the omnipotent mother within him, the one who in his childhood decided over love or withdrawal of love. This primal experience of feminine power remains active in the unconscious. In partnership, it gets reactivated. Suddenly, he stands again before a woman who is emotionally more powerful than him. The tragedy is that he fights exactly the qualities he needs most. Her emotional intelligence could heal him, her intuition could guide him, her empathy could make him whole, but his fear of her superiority blinds him to these gifts. This panic shows up in his behavior various ways. He interrupts her when she becomes too wise. He ridicules her feelings when they become too penetrating. He claims to be rational while she's just emotional. All attempts to reverse power dynamics and prove his supposed superiority. His partner experiences this as degradation and disrespect. She doesn't understand that his behavior doesn't arise from arrogance, but from deepest insecurity. He fears her power because he senses how much he needs it. Have you ever observed a man trying to rationalize a woman even though she's emotionally completely right? The fifth fear might be the most destructive of all because it targets himself. The fifth signal you recognize through his permanent self-presentation. He can never admit that he needs help, that he doubts, that he's human. Imagine this. A man goes through difficult times, professional stress, health concerns, inner doubts plague him. His partner notices and lovingly offers her support. Let's talk about it. I'm here for you. But instead of opening up, he becomes aggressive. I'm fine. I don't need help. I can handle this alone. He builds a wall of false strength around himself even as he's collapsing internally. Freud would interpret this reaction as struggle between the ego ideal and the superego. The ego ideal, the image the man wants to have of himself, is unshakably strong, never weak, always in control. The superego, the internalized social expectations, reinforces this demand. A real man shows no weakness. A real man solves his problems himself. This fear of his own weakness results from decades of conditioning. From childhood, boys learn that vulnerability is dangerous. Indians know no pain. Boys don't cry. Don't be such a baby. These messages dig deep into the unconscious and create an inner judge that punishes every weakness. The tragic irony lies in that exactly this supposed strength becomes his greatest weakness. By denying his humanity, he isolates himself from the love that could heal him. His partner doesn't want him as a superhero, she wants him as a human being, with all flaws and doubts. Freud recognized that men tend towards sublimation. They transform their weaknesses into apparent strengths. The man, afraid of intimacy, becomes a workaholic. The man who feels lonely becomes a lone wolf. The man who needs help becomes a helper of others. This reaction formation conceals true needs behind a mask of superiority. This fear of his own weakness manifests in his behavior in multiple ways. He never admits mistakes even when they're obvious. He never asks for directions even when completely lost. He never confesses ignorance even when he has no clue. He never shows tears even when his heart breaks. The insidious thing about this fear is that it reinforces itself. The more he hides his weakness, the weaker he feels. The more he builds a facade, the more he distances himself from his true self. He becomes prisoner of his own self-presentation. His partner experiences this as an emotional wall. She sees that he's suffering but cannot reach through to him. She offers help, but he rejects it. She wants closeness, but he gives her only performance. This refusal of humanity makes true love impossible, because love requires authenticity. The fear of his own weakness transforms him into a caricature of himself. He plays the strong man so intensely that he forgets who he really is. Yet his soul yearns for nothing more than the moment when he can finally drop the mask. Do you recognize this pattern? Have you ever experienced a man who would rather suffer than show weakness? But the sixth and final fear is the deepest of all. It touches the foundation of human existence. The sixth and final signal is the most subtle yet most devastating. He fears true love because it means he stops existing as he knows himself. Picture this. After years of struggle, fears and misunderstandings, a man stands before the moment of absolute truth. His partner is ready to love him completely, not despite his weaknesses, but with them. She offers him what he's searched for his entire life, unconditional acceptance, but instead of rejoicing, he feels panic because he senses this love will change him forever. Freud recognized in his later works that the human mind is governed by two opposing forces, Eros, the life drive that seeks connection and union, and Thanatos, the death drive that wants to preserve the existing and come to rest. In men, this conflict is particularly intense because true love means a kind of psychological death, the death of the isolated, controlled, seemingly independent self. This primal fear of union is paradoxical. The man longs for love, but simultaneously fears its consequences. True love means transformation, vulnerability, giving up old identities. It means he won't be the same person he was. And this prospect of ego dissolution terrifies his unconscious like nothing else. Freud would describe this fear as merger anxiety, the primitive terror of losing one's own boundaries in love. The man fears that in union with his partner he stops being an independent being. He becomes part of something greater, but loses his individual existence in the process. This fear shows up in the crucial moments of the relationship. When she confesses her complete love, he hesitates. When she suggests moving in together, he finds excuses. When conversation turns to marriage, he becomes evasive, not because he doesn't love her, but because he loves her too much and senses that this love will fundamentally change him. The tragedy is that exactly this transformation is what his soul needs most deeply. The isolated, anxious, controlled man he has become is not his true self, but the product of his fears. True love would make him who he really is, but his ego clings to familiar misery instead of risking unknown happiness. This primal fear of union explains why so many men flee from love, even when they've found it. It explains why some men remain for decades in superficial relationships instead of committing to the one who could truly transform them. Freud recognized that this fear is ultimately a fear of life itself, because to truly live means to change, to grow, to leave old forms behind. The man who overcomes this fear won't die. He will finally begin to live. His partner senses this deep ambivalence. She feels his love and simultaneously his resistance to it. She doesn't understand that his hesitation doesn't mean doubt about her, but doubt about his own ability to survive the transformation that true love brings. Have you ever experienced a man who ran from the greatest love of his life? These 6 fears form the invisible prison in which the masculine psyche holds itself captive. What will you do with this knowledge? Which of these 6 fears have you recognized in yourself or others? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from.